This is a problem, and you could look at, Libya, as a worst case scenario, perhaps, for what can happen when things just devolve. There was a great deal of hope in the immediate aftermath, and there's still hope. It's not saying that they can't pull this together and then create a government that respects, all religions and, ethnic groups, but they're nowhere near there yet.
U.S. and Israel are escalating airstrikes in Syria amid growing instability. So the U.S. has intensified airstrikes targeting ISIS camps in central Syria, aiming to prevent the group's resurgence. Israel has also ramped up military operations, striking militant positions near the Golan Heights to curb terrorist threats. These actions are coming as Syria's new interim government, led by Ahmad al-Sharaa, hopefully I said that correctly, struggles to stabilize the nation post-Assad. Efforts at political reform face resistance from Assad loyalists and internal factions, with security forces recently cracking down on regime holdouts in Latakia. Is that correct?
Latakia.
Okay, so the region impact is significant. While the airstrikes target immediate threats, they risk escalating tensions and complicating Syria's fragile political transition. Question here is, are U.S. and Israeli airstrikes making Syria safer, or are they just adding to the chaos that's already in the region?
I would vote for the latter. But that's just me. It depends. I mean, you could argue both sides, right? Look, the problem with Syria is exactly what we've seen in other places, right? So Bashar al-Assad, ran off to Moscow. He and his dad were butchers. And with a tremendous amount of blood on their hands. And so everybody was basically cheering, of course, when the rebels were able to move in and take over. At the same time, look, the group that took over, that forced Assad out, was a band of various rebel factions, right? So Sharaa just happened to lead the most organized, well-resourced of the bands, right? And he's now heading up the government. But he's still got a problem because he's got all these fighters out there from these other factions. He's been, trying to figure out, well, how do we create a federal government? How do we create a military, a national police and military force? But you've got all these fighters with different ambitions and agendas and ideas. And a number of them are being recruited into extremism. ISIS sees an opportunity like they always do when there's chaos, just like Al-Qaeda does and others. So this is a problem. And you could look at, Libya, as a worst case scenario, perhaps, for what can happen when things just devolve. Libya is more tribal, I guess you could argue, than Syria is, but similar concept. So yeah, there was a great deal of hope in the immediate aftermath, and there's still hope. It's not saying that they can't pull this together and then create a government that respects, all religions and, ethnic groups. But they're nowhere near there yet.
Ironclad creates premium content no matter the environment. From extreme elements to unforgiving terrain, we thrive on crafting content that captures the essence of your brand in the most challenging conditions. Bring your brand story to life, ensuring your message leaves an impact. Ready to elevate your vision? Connect with us today at ironcladagency.com.
What is the strategic importance of Syria for people who don't even understand why we'd be talking about this?
Well, prior to Assad falling, the importance was they were a very tight ally of Russia and Iran, and they were part of that axis. And Syria was a key route for Iran to get hardware, weapons, and resources to Hezbollah. They were, instrumental in kind of pushing Iran regime's objective, which is to maintain instability and keep Israel on the back foot and hopefully one day remove Israel from the map. That's the Iranian regime's, overarching objective. And that's why they built that series of proxies in the area. And Syria, you could argue, okay, it was a state, but basically they were doing Iran's bidding.
Yeah.
And again, also it was an important military outpost for Russia that allowed them to use it as a staging ground for their other exploits and adventures. So now, what's their function? Well, if you could turn it towards the west, then great. Look, this is that interesting argument. I forget where I had that conversation where I realized some people just maybe look at the world differently. But when people were talking about USAID and others and complaining, oh my God, they're using it to influence countries overseas, right? Or the minerals deal with Ukraine. Well, that sets a bad precedent because it's like then we're saying we'll provide assistance to you if you give us something. And I'm thinking, what the fuck do you think we always do, right? Even if it's just helping support some country, we're doing it because we want them aligned with us, and not a country that's hostile to our interests. Which, of course, this stage of the game would be Iran and Russia and China, basically. China, Russia, and Iran are out there doing everything they can to influence the hearts and minds of a variety of nations, both because they want to have them as kind of bulwarks against the U.S., but also they're probably going after minerals deals. Look, that's, everybody wonders, why is Putin so set on owning the eastern part of Ukraine? Well, again, it's because 60% of those natural resources are in eastern Ukraine and, also Crimea. So anyway, that was a rambling answer to your question.
No, it's a good one. I mean, honestly, I think most people would struggle to find Syria on a map. I know I did before I started deploying over to the general region. Then it was a lot easier to find. But before that, I'd be like, oh, I've definitely heard of that. I think it's over by Kentucky, So
that's right. I think it's somewhere between New Jersey and North Carolina,
west of the Mississippi, right? That's last I checked. That's where Syria is.
Man, yeah. But people ask that question all the time. I say, why did we? What was our geopolitical interest in Libya? Well, okay, good question. We really didn't have one, right? So it's always a good idea to ask. I'm not an isolationist. I think that's a serious mistake as well, because that essentially means you believe that the world can manage itself and everything's going to be just fine if you draw the curtains. It's kind of like libertarians. I envy libertarians in a sense because they can always take that moral high ground without any consequences. We shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't be engaged in any wars. We shouldn't be spending any money over there. We shouldn't be doing this. And you think, okay, so you imagine we're a community of nations, and somehow there aren't countries out there that don't have our interests at heart. So I get it. It's a lovely idea. It's not the world I saw anyway.
Same here. It's fascinating to me how many people don't understand that whoever you are and whatever you believe, there's an axis out there somewhere that really would like to do nothing more than wipe their ass with you. Yeah.
It really I guess I understand the fatigue issue, right? You look at Ukraine and you think, oh my God, it's 3 years and it's spending all these resources after 20 years with Afghanistan and Iraq, right? So sure, people are tired. It doesn't mean that there's still not those elements, countries, organizations, terrorist groups out there that, like you said, would just like to, fire a rocket up our ass. That's what they want to do. So there are things that I think you have to stand for. There are principles you have to stand on. And there are times when you need to be involved. So, we should be more discerning. I agree with that. And we should be more clear about what our objectives are. We should be more transparent with the American people as to why we're doing things, and why we're spending their money. But there are times when you need to be engaged.
I agree.